TLDR, Cass from Clutterbug yelled at me and I kind of liked it.
She's a hot mess. She definitely needs help.
So that's why this week I decided to take the Clutterbug quiz and see what my organizational style is. Now, one thing that you need to know about me is that I'm a minimalist, and so I was a little bit skeptical as to whether or not the Clutterbug quiz would be able to categorize me and if I would be able to learn anything helpful from it. But let me tell you, the results blew my mind. And it was such a fun and eye-opening experience that I just had to get on a call with Cass. And between the quiz and talking to Cass, I had a lot of light bulb moments that I wanted to share with you because I think that the same principles that helped me might also be able to help you, but not just you, also the other members of your family who maybe you don't see completely eye to eye with when it comes to organization. But before we dive into that, I want to clarify what I mean when I say that Cass yelled at me. So the gist is that around a year ago, I was a guest speaker at a virtual organizational conference, and while that conference was running, I also had the opportunity of attending other sessions that were hosted by all sorts of different experts in decluttering, organizing, budgeting, all sorts of things. And Cass was one of the speakers, and she's not only the creator of the Clutterbug organizing philosophy, but she's also a published author, a YouTuber with a massive following, and a host on the HGTV show Hot Mess House. Cass was one of the first speakers at that conference, and within the first few minutes of her session, she had me in hysterics because she was talking about how to declutter your underwear drawer, and she did this through a thought exercise where we had to ask ourselves if there was an emergency and our underwear had to be cut off our bodies by some hunky paramedics, would we be embarrassed by our underwear? Like, did they have holes in them? Did they have stained? Were they some ugly looking granny panties? And she was definitely getting a little bit fired up when she was talking about how we deserve to have panties and wear panties that look good and that we feel good in. I have to say that I felt really called out by her presentation because I am definitely someone who will keep clothes until they have holes in them and they've gotten to the point where they can't even be mended anymore, or keeping tennis shoes that get holes worn in the toes because I have this weird toe thing where my toe tends to put holes in the top. So that's definitely me. And she was so funny and engaging and helpful and encouraging that I knew from that moment on I was going to be a Clutterbug fan. And what's funny is I've had people ask me what my Clutterbug type was before, and the thing is I didn't know, and I didn't think that I needed to know because as a minimalist, when it comes to organizing, my basic philosophy is don't. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but I always felt that the less you have to organize, the better. But in last week's video, I was doing a tour of our minimalist home, and I had someone ask me yet again what kind of clutterbug I was. So I decided that I was going to find out the answer to that question right here and now with you today. So if I want to find out my clutterbug type, first I have to take the Clutterbug quiz. And I'm going to do that right now. And if you want to take the quiz yourself after you watch this video, I'll make sure to link Cass's Clutterbug quiz and some other helpful resources from her down in the description box and pinned comment below for you to check out. And I like how she puts this little infographic with the 4 different organizational styles right here on the front page so that you kind of know what to expect when you're going into the quiz. So let's click Start Quiz. Okay, so for the first question, I can already tell that my answer now that I'm a minimalist is going to be different than what it used to be before I started decluttering, because I would say that now I'd put it away in a neat pile for later. But back before I started decluttering, I was totally someone who would just kind of hide things here and there. So I guess what that means is that your clutterbug type might change over time. Oh my goodness. This next question is making me feel seen. Even as a minimalist, one of the biggest challenges I have is this hoarding instinct to hang on to things that I feel like could be useful in the future.
You know me so well, Cass.
Okay, I'm not going to show you any more questions, so you'll have to take the quiz for yourself if you want to see more. But let's go through this quickly and I can find out what kind of clutterbug I am. Okay, so I just finished up the quiz and I'm excited to announce that I am a cricket. According to Cass, crickets love visual simplicity and organizational abundance, and we like to have our everyday items out of sight but can be perfectionistic and are detail oriented. So of course I wanted to know more about crickets and how to organize as a cricket. So I decided to watch Cass's video down here at the bottom of my results page. And one thing she said really stuck out with me, which is that crickets love visual simplicity, but that we tend to pile and procrastinate on things because we want to do things perfectly. So we're happy piling them up for later until we can address them the right way. After I watched that video on organizing as a cricket, I kind of went down a clutterbug wormhole. Clutterbug wormhole. Why is there no clutterbug worm? Food for thought, Cass. And I saw this one video where Cass showed how she would organize the same closet 4 different ways for each clutterbug type. As I was staring at that thumbnail picture, I was like, yes, that is organizing perfection to me. So I feel like Cass totally nailed my organizational style with this quiz. And taking this quiz really got me wondering what kind of clutterbug my husband might be. So I decided to pull him in and let him take the quiz as well. And it turns out that he's a cricket too.
I'm a cricket.
And I think that if you hear that we're both crickets, you would assume that we would get along together in perfect organizational harmony, right? Wrong. So when I started thinking about it, I think that there are some reasons why we still tend to butt heads even though we're both crickets. So I decided to call Cass in on this one, and here's what she had to say. I was so grateful to Cass for taking time out of her busy schedule to be able to sit down and have a little chat with me. So here's what she had to say about my test results and some other questions that I had. Yeah, so I took the Clutterbug quiz. I took the test and I found out I'm a cricket. And then I asked my husband to also take the test, and he's also a cricket. But what surprised me about that is that actually my husband and I butt heads a little bit about organizing sometimes. And I'm just wondering if that's common with like spouses who are the same clutterbug type. Have you ever encountered that before?
Yeah, listen, you can't put everybody into 4 categories, even though I try to put everybody into 4 categories. It's definitely a scale, and I think you can be a little bit more this or a little bit more that. But I also think a lot of people sometimes take the quiz based on their fantasy self or their idealized self. And so sometimes I say just take the quiz and throw it in the trash, because if you're not answering realistically, you're not always going to get you're going to get the answer of what you want to be, not necessarily what you are. So I would be curious kind of what your disagreements are. Are they like, this is how it should go, this is super perfect? Or is it more like, why don't you ever put your things away?
So I have a really good example. He will take off his pants or socks and hang them on the radiator because in his mind, he wants to come back and wear them again, and they're not clean, so they shouldn't be put with the clean clothes. So we'll just drape them over the radiator, right? And that bothers me, but he likes doing that. But then my children and I, when we come home, sometimes, you know, the kids are dirty. I have to get them back to the bath. We'll take our shoes off at the front, stuff our coats up in the entryway, and then they'll just sit there. And that bothers my husband, who likes to have the entryway tidy. So I'm thinking what it is we're bothered by other people's messes, but not necessarily our own mess.
Yes. And hearing both of you're both crickets. Listen, there's no quiz required here. You're definitely both crickets. He's coming from a place of logic. So he's like, I'm going to wear this again. Logically, putting this away doesn't make sense. And it doesn't sound like you have a designated home for interim clothes to, like those in-between clothes to go. And so it totally makes sense as a cricket that he would just put it on the radiator, but it also makes sense as a cricket that would drive you crazy because you don't want to look at it. And then the entranceway, again, you're like, I just have to move fast. We're moving on with our day. I'm going to just embrace that this is where it's going. But again, visual clutter is really going to stress him as a cricket out. So you've nailed it. But it sounds to me like you both do share the same organizing style, which is such a blessing that you don't even know.
You know, what's funny is we recently did a declutter of his clothes, and I actually cleaned off space at the top of his wardrobe. So we have a large wardrobe. One side is mine, one side is his. And I cleared off almost the entire top of there's like a shelf there where I said, okay, now you can put your clothes up there, but he still doesn't do it.
No, he needs a hook for sure. But you want it hidden. So, like behind the bedroom door, can you put hooks there? So it's like visually out of sight. In the closet still feels like a way. And so I can see how his perfectionist brain is like, but these are dirty. I'm not putting them away. Honestly, give him some hooks behind the door for his pants to go, and he'll stop putting them on the radiator. Even 3M hooks that are really strong that aren't going to damage anything. And just like, here's your home. I don't see it, but it isn't in the closet, which might feel wrong to him.
Now, you mentioned that it's nice when you are on the same page as far as organizing, but I'm sure that a lot of people who are going to be watching my video and who are members of your channel are not the same organizing style as their spouses. So what do we do when our organizing style doesn't exactly match our partners?
Yeah, this is the worst, okay? Because the truth is the compromise has to go to the person who struggles the most, which means we go to the visual organizer. We always compromise to the visual organizer and the less detailed person, because it's a lot easier for somebody who we don't want to see our stuff, but listen, we're not going to forget about it. A visual organizer, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. We have to have visual solutions for them. And it's a lot easier for a more laid back, less detailed person to be able to like toss their stuff in a bin. It's kind of going to drive you crickets crazy, but they're never going to be able to maintain a really detailed system. So basically, butterflies win. They're the champions. They wear the crown. We always default to butterflies, but just in those shared spaces with the things that everyone's touching. So think entranceways. If everyone's taking a like if everyone's paying the bills, if everyone's managing the money, really, really visual systems. When you come in and you drop backpacks and all of that stuff at the front door, have hooks instead of closets, because hangers don't work for butterflies. They're not going to take the time to open the closet door, take out a hanger, they're going to drop their coat on the floor. And so we just have to embrace this. We have to compromise, and we have to have like a row of hooks. Yeah, it sucks looking at coats, but it sucks more picking up coats off the floor.
Is there a certain clutterbug type that's like the most common, or are they pretty evenly spread out?
Cricket is like the traditional organizing style type. So that's actually less common. But in my industry, where I know a lot of professional organizers, they're almost always crickets. I think they're pretty evenly spread out. I also think a lot of children, almost all children, are butterflies. So perhaps that like skews the numbers, because as you grow, you kind of get into your more, authentic organizing style. But all kids are really visual, and all little kids, they're not overly meticulous. When they're done with something, they'll drop it, or they'll kind of put it where it goes, but there isn't a lot of detail. They're not sorting Lego into colors most of the time.
It's so true. And I'm so glad that you said that most children are butterflies, because I think even with us as a fairly minimalist family, my kids still struggle with picking up after themselves, and I still need to remind them. And we don't have hooks, but what we have is we have a basket, because it's close to our dining room table. And that's where we do our homework together in the evenings when they come home. So they're supposed to put it in the basket, theoretically, but sometimes it gets next to the basket and the stuff comes out on the floor. And so it's just kind of got to keep, I guess, reinforcing it until they get a little bit better about sorting their stuff and managing it better too. It's a work in progress always with kids, right?
Yeah, it is. And there's definitely a trick with little kids. I think like if you look at that like Montessori or a kindergarten classroom, they're nailing it, because that's what works for kids. So having one basket like just for homeschooling or art supplies doesn't actually work, only because they have to dig to find what they need. So they have to make a mess to find what they need. So we need some level of separation for kids. An art caddy works really well because they can see everything and toss it back quickly. I think the problem with like toy boxes is it's so big, everything inside becomes invisible. And now they have to pull everything out to find what they need. So a sorted bin system where it's like no lids, they can see what they have using picture labels, or if they can read big word labels, means like they don't have to use their brain in order to find and put things away. It's like super easy, just as easy to put it away as it is to just put it down beside. And that's kind of the system that really works for children. So I think if your kids are like, they have a basket, but they're kind of making a mess of the basket, it's probably that they're wanting the things on the bottom.
I have my youngest son is actually a little bit tidier than my oldest son. So sometimes he'll remind older brother, pick up your towel off the floor. Oh, dropping bath towels on the floor after drying themselves off. Just drop it on the floor. We've been really working on that. Hang up the towel instead of dropping on the floor. So I heard his little brother reminding bigger brother today, hang it up.
Hey, I have teenagers who still have not got this. So that's amazing. Good for you. It's never going to be perfect all the time. And expecting that, I think, is just so stressful. It's stressful for you. It's stressful for your kids. But I do think we can expect like to not have to step on stuff and to not have to move things in order to use our home. Our surfaces are generally pretty clutter-free. We can vacuum without having to pick things up off the floor. That's reasonable, and that's completely doable.
I think that this is really great, and I can't wait to share it with everyone, and I will definitely send them to your quiz to try it out for themselves. And maybe I'll be able to try some of the tips that you taught me in the future too. I had so much fun taking the Clutterbug quiz, and it definitely challenged me to start to think differently about the way that we organize in our home. Again, I highly encourage you to go take the quiz and find out your Clutterbug type yourself. So make sure to check the description box and pinned comment below for the link to the quiz. And if you haven't already, please make sure to give this video a like and consider going down and hitting the little red subscribe button and ringing the bell to turn on all notifications so that you don't miss any of the helpful videos that I'm sharing here on my channel each week to help you conquer your clutter and simplify your way to a life you love. And if you missed last week's minimalist home tour, make sure to go check out this video, or I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.